Welcome to Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. Your Day Weather Podcast brought to you by the Advocates Injury Attorneys. If you've been injured in an accident, don't face it alone. Get an experienced local Wyoming attorney on your side. Free consultations at wyomingadvocates.com or call 307-800-1952. You deserve an advocate. Well, high wind event again, mountain snows coming in as well. Essentially, what is happening is a repeat, to some extent, of last week's weather. There are differences, like better mountain snows, but a very similar situation that brought our high wind event to the region last week. It's going to be happening again, and it's starting to wrap up today. Now, in these extremely strong jet stream winds that are going to cut across the Rockies, there will be 3 waves of high elevation snow. Late tonight, tomorrow into early Thursday, a smaller event that's going to come through Friday. Then another mountain snow event that'll get a little bit further south will occur as we get on into the weekend, especially during the day Saturday. There will be some leakage of snow showers moving across the plains with, as you would expect, plenty of wind. So we're going to have some travel concerns. First of all, travel concerns with the high wind event, especially I-80, I-25, but also I-70 into Colorado, even parts of I-40 across the panhandle of Texas and northern New Mexico. We're also going to be looking at strong winds along Interstate 90 across northern Wyoming and South Dakota. Snow in the mountain pass areas and near the mountains will be a travel concern as well. So I know folks may start traveling this weekend. That's why the heads up. Now, this Omega block pattern we've been talking about continues to dominate into early next week. But after that, we might see some subtle changes that we'll discuss here at the end of the video. Lenticular clouds starting to want to get forming there in the Cody area yesterday, and you can see a lot of turbulence going on as the cross-barrier winds, we call them, the winds hitting the mountain ranges at a nearly perpendicular angle, making those wave clouds beginning to form on the lee side of the Laramie Range as well, but offering up a pretty display. Same there in southeastern Wyoming, and another beautiful Dave Bell shot of the Wind River Mountains. Nice light there on those peaks with the Wind River Mountains queued up to be under a winter storm watch here in the next 24 to 36 hours. The satellite image this morning looks eerily like last week again. We talked about the weather is basically repeating. Here's the next big plume of moisture coming off the Pacific, directed into the Pacific Northwest. The flooding will not be as bad, but with all of the heavy rain in the Pacific Northwest last week, even though this rain event, the next one won't be as heavy, it's still going to be causing some problems. So we've got this funneling of moisture along the strong jet stream winds coming in. You can really see that on the water vapor. These are high clouds, wave clouds, beginning to form in the lee of the Rockies. Again, a map that looks a lot like last week. Wherever you see brown, it is a high wind message or a high wind warning or some type of advisory for wind. So you can look at the large part of the real estate in the west impacted by winds. And these warnings for winds will then expand further east and south when we update this map for you tomorrow. As the winds will come out, that area I just highlighted will be impacted by high winds as well. Then you can see these islands of green, pink, and blue. These islands are sticking up out of those high wind advisories because those are winter storm watches and winter storm warnings in the pink and the blue areas there. Then you can see all the wind advisories. Of course, the Bighorn Basin will be sheltered from the high winds. This area here, the reason it's not under a high wind watch at the moment is because snow is going to be coming into the mix here later on. The upper level winds aloft starting today look like this. You can see that river of wind coming off the Pacific into the Pacific Northwest. Then the jet stream wind by tomorrow strengthens. And then as that little trough comes across the northern Rockies, we're going to see those very strong winds. There's that little wave. This is what's going to come through on Wednesday. A slug of Pacific moisture, very strong winds aloft. And there are your wind speeds right here. You're over 160 to 175 knots. So you convert that to miles per hour. We're just coming under 200 mile per hour jet stream winds. cutting across the region. But they're coming in more from a northwest to southeast direction instead of a due west direction as compared to last week. So that may not make the gusts as extreme, but we're splitting hairs here. It's going to be awfully windy and a real big problem for travelers with crosswinds on Interstate 80, 25, 70, 90. And you can see the strong winds will be getting down here into the southern plains as well as we get into the day on Thursday. This is through Thursday morning. So you can see a lot of red, a lot of gray, extremely strong winds up here in northwest Montana. The Rocky Mountain front of Montana down into Cody there, but just about all the normal wind-prone areas, but spreading out across the Dakotas, as well. So those are just estimated wind gusts. So when you're seeing wind gusts here in the 50s and 60s, you've got some 70s here, you're going to be likely gusting into the 80s in some of these situations. Now there will be moisture through Thursday morning with that slug, strong jet stream energy. A lot of Pacific moisture getting driven in. We can get down into Northern California now and even into the Wasatch and then into the northern mountains of Colorado and southern Wyoming as this next push is further south than the last push. The deeper Arctic air is getting pushed up into Canada, so the overrunning snows will stay in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Alberta. Scattered snow showers, though, will spread across the plains, but as you can see, once you get off the mountains, you're really not going to see a lot. Now, by Saturday, somewhat of a similar situation. The trough isn't as deep, but we have another little low, another little ripple coming on through as the jet stream is taking this west-east transit across the United States. So basically this bottles up. It keeps it warm down here, keeps it cold up here, and if you're in between, you're in that gradient where the strong winds aloft are going to be. So you're going to see this next wave come through, and as we showed you yesterday, there's a narrow, it's narrow, but there's a narrow strip of deeper Pacific moisture, and it's riding right along here, right along the thermal boundary between the warmer and the colder. When you get a situation like this, you're going to drive another slug of moisture into the mountains. So this is for the 3-day period of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that Friday through Sunday period, this is in addition to the graphic I showed you earlier. So there's going to be another good slug of snow coming into the mountains, getting further down into the Sierra, the Cascades, along into Oregon here, the mountains of northwest Montana, northern Idaho. But we're also going to get these fingers of snow coming out into the plains. So far northern Wyoming, southern Montana. We talked about maybe some snow showers, snow squalls Saturday along Interstate 80. The European model is hinting at that. We saw that a couple of weekends ago, hence patterns kind of repeating itself. So traveling on Saturday, you got to watch the mountain passes. You got to watch for more wind. It'll be windy this weekend on the plains, but we're going to throw snow showers into the mix. So if you start your travels this weekend, mainly it's in the Rockies here and near the Rockies. Out here on the plains, other than these snow showers here, there's really not a lot going on, nor is there anything really going on in the desert Southwest. And there you can see the cumulative snowfall with these 3 waves coming through. Certainly, this is dominant in the mountains, but these are going to be significant mountain snows. Good for the snowpack and the ski areas. Colorado's mountain areas, ski areas in the northern areas of the state will get refreshed with snow, but not those southern ski areas. Same for places like Park City and Alta, as well as Jackson and other ski areas a little bit further north in that jet stream flow. This leads us into Christmas week. Well, what's going to be happening Christmas week? Good question. We're going to have another straightening out of the flow on Monday after a busy weekend. High here down into northwest Mexico. We still have the blocking pattern up here in the Aleutians right here, but we're going to likely see this low come down the coast like this, and it looks like it's going to be a wet Christmas week in California. What we've got to figure out is there may be some ejection of moisture around Christmas Eve and Christmas Day into the Rockies. So don't close the door on possible precipitation, especially if you're on the western side of the divide for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. But we'll get, as we get closer, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But we've got another readjustment phase. I want to show you 2 things here. The blocking omega high in the Aleutians and this high building out here in the Atlantic. What may transpire between Christmas and New Year's is maybe a changing of the guard of the blocking pattern. So this is where the omega pattern is going to be as of tomorrow. Still right there. Got the low, we got the high, we got the low, and then we've got the high. So you can see that they're equal. You have the equal number. This is how it goes around the globe like this. So with this blocking high still there on Wednesday, the pattern through Wednesday is going to basically be the same like what we've been seeing. And if we take a bigger northern hemispheric scale, again, this is looking down on the North Pole from space. Here's the US, here's Africa and Europe. Here's the blocking high, the omega pattern out here in the Pacific. We're starting to see this high pressure here in the Atlantic wanting to build and grow. Let me show you what happens if we take a look at the precipitation anomalies over the next 10 days. This really highlights what's going on. Where you see the brown, okay, you're seeing a dry anomaly, and that is perfectly positioned underneath the blocking ridge. Then we have this dry anomaly that's right here. That's covering parts of the Central Plains, parts of the Rockies, and the green and the blue is where it's wet. So what you see is that you have a direct connection to the dry here to the dry here. The wet here is connected to the wet here. The wet here is connected to the wet here. So what you see, and then this dry here is connected to this dry here. So to get back to what I was talking about, this omega pattern, our pattern won't change until this strong anomaly. And if you look, this is the strongest dry anomaly in the northern hemisphere where that block is. There's another little bit of a blocking there. So this is what's driving it. So where there is one, there's another, okay? So this is how things are oriented. So where you are in position to these W's and D's, especially when the pattern gets stagnant, you're stuck. So that's why there's flooding in the Pacific Northwest, but that's why it's dry in the desert Southwest, a lot of the Rockies, and into the Central and Southern Plains. You have to change the dynamic of where these W's and the D's are. They got to shift. That's why I'm bringing this up. So this is the northern hemispheric 500 millibar pattern right now. There's your omega block. Here's the straight flow across the U.S. with the polar vortex taking an east-west axis like this. But let's go out further. Let's go out to 15 days. So 15 days is New Year's Eve. So we'll just do this. You can see that the map looks different. Okay, there's certainly some structural changes. We're looking at the polar vortexes being a little bit different. There's more waves going on. However, what I want you to look at is this particular pattern here where you see a circle of gray. And look what happens where the next circle of gray is. It's a Greenland block. So you've got the blocking pattern and the omega pattern now forming in Greenland. Yes, there's still a high pressure ridge here, but it's not the omega pattern anymore. So could we have a changing of guard? We go from the Aleutians block here to an omega block in the North Atlantic, which is called a Greenland block. If that happens, then the western United States weather heading into the new year may trend a little bit more active because we're changing the guard here, so to speak. Will this happen? Good question. Put a big question mark on that, but I just thought I would show it to you because everyone's wanting to look a little bit further ahead. Have yourself a good Tuesday. We will see you tomorrow.